This morning I'm by the River Tay again, just downstream of Dunkeld, as it makes its way out of the Grampians and down to the North Sea. And there, in the year 1320, a precious document set sail for Europe. This week last year was the 700th anniversary of the Declaration of Arbroath. And although the celebrations were cancelled because of the pandemic, its significance wasn't lost on people all around Scotland. Many people are familiar with its most famous passage: "While 100 of us remain alive, we will never in the slightest measure submit to the domination of the English. We fight not for honour, riches or glory, but for freedom alone, which no true man will give up but with his life." It's stirring stuff and deeply felt. But this wasn't the rallying cry of some battle-stained warriors on a windy hilltop, still flushed with success from their victory at Bannockburn 6 years earlier. This was a highly sophisticated, finely nuanced, diplomatic document asserting Scotland's sovereignty to the highest international authority of the day, the Pope. And at its heart was a radical idea: that the king ruled only with the approval of the people, and that if they determined that he was putting Scotland's sovereignty at risk, they could have him removed. It was an idea that set Scotland on a different path to those of most other countries of the day, including England, where kings and queens ruled as if by divine right. So what, you might say, ancient history? I disagree. I think something as fundamental as that profoundly shapes the story that we tell ourselves about who we are. And today, 700 years later, that radical vision of democracy is deeply embedded in the DNA of Scotland and her people, which is why it's to be told that we can't choose our own destiny feels like such an insult. And when we're told it by a government who themselves appear to feel free to do entirely as they choose without suffering any consequences, who are intent on trashing some of the most basic tenets of democracy, it feels like a double insult. And yet, things are shifting. Only last week, if you were quick enough to catch it, one of their own advisors posted a blog in which he argued that there was nothing to prevent an independent Scotland from becoming an economic success. Elsewhere, overseas commentators are warming increasingly to the inevitability of Scottish independence. One journal, an American journal, Foreign Policy, wrote last week that the choice now facing Scottish voters is not so much one of "can we make it?" as "what kind of society do we want to be?" And my answer to that, which I've said before, is tolerant, progressive, outward-looking, European, socially just. And there are increasing numbers of people all round Scotland who are becoming convinced that we have everything we need in order to achieve that. The alternative, which is all that the unionist parties have to offer, is frankly a horror movie in 3 acts. 1, the legacy of Brexit, which it's looking more and more likely is turning into some really nasty time bomb. 2, an all-out assault on Holyrood and its powers. And 3, years more austerity as we bear the costs of Westminster's inept and incontinent handling of the early stages of the pandemic. It astonishes me to think that the Scottish Tories, Scottish Labour and the Scottish Liberal Democrats are all prepared and willing to subject us to this. And then I remember that they are merely branches of the Westminster parties doing what they're told from London, and that this is why they actually have nothing at all to offer the country that they say they represent. The polls are starting to come thick and fast now. To take 2 of the ones that have been published this week, one gave the SNP a healthy majority in May, the other a slender minority. But in both cases, strong performances by the Greens ensured that there was an overall majority for independence. But this actually highlights the problem with polls, and it serves as a warning that we can't really take anything at all for granted in the run-up to this most important election of our lifetimes. 700 years ago, those monks and nobles in Arbroath proudly declared their freedom from the baleful influence of Edward Longshanks, Hammer of the Scots, Edward I. We must do everything we can between now and May the 6th to ensure that we have the chance to take the next step so that we can, in time, proudly declare our independence from the baleful influence of Westminster.